The economic recovery is very fragile. We're going to be facing growth that many of us would consider at best anemic. And for every 2 steps forward, there's going to be 1 step back. So it's going to feel pretty bumpy. In those circumstances, it's quite hard for corporate boards to evaluate the risk they're really facing. Are we heading for a double-dip recession? Are we really going to get back to the growth of the previous decade, or has the recession changed things for good? People know what they need to do with risk, but there are so many imponderables out there, it's quite difficult to make real judgments. You need to look at risk, but you also need to look at hazard. What we didn't look at was a relatively low level of risk, but if it ever materialised, it was an enormous hazard. That's what we missed. So a bit of health and safety methodology wouldn't hurt in financial and corporate risk. The obvious one is too much gearing and too much debt. Corporate leaders tell us that they will not return to the days of significant gearing. Well, let's see what actually happens. The pressures from investors will be there to do that, but corporate leaders are certainly chastened. But it isn't just in obvious areas like debt. Supply chains are going to be revolutionised over the next few years, and that has big implications for risk. So what corporate leaders are saying to us is they will bring that control back into the business. If they do joint ventures, they're going to be much more tightly regulated because they don't want that risk exposure from the vulnerability of their own supply chain. When we talk to chief executives about their investment in low carbon, it's actually gone up. It's bucked the trend. Why? Because low carbon is about a very complex range of stakeholders. There's a certain reputational pressure, there's a certain political pressure. What's happened in the last year is that the green consumer has begun to wake up. So there's demands on the business from the people who pay their salaries. And that means that people in business have got to be far more alive, as we know, to a wider range of stakeholders. The reputation of business has taken a hit. There are those in the corporate community who feel it's unfair that they have caught the backwash of the unpopularity of the banks, but they have. So throughout the business community, there is a desire to face up to stakeholders and to show a reputable and sustainable path for wealth creation that may be slightly steadier, slightly less risk-taking, slightly more stodgy, but it may be what the stakeholders demand. Surely the story of the recession is that risks arose that we didn't know about, that we had genuinely missed. The biggest risk, of course, systemic risk. We all looked at narrow risk. None of us looked at the system as a whole. That can't be done easily from within the business. You do need your advisors to be able to look from an outside-in view. And I think corporates are very, very keen to have that added value service. Perhaps in the decade where money was cheap, where growth was constant, where chief executives almost had to completely miss the plot to do anything other than succeed, we felt we didn't need to say as much to stakeholders. We didn't need to reach out to communities. We didn't need to explain ourselves. And rebuilding that corporate reputation must be high on the agenda of any significant British business.